Otherwise, you know how they release liquid as they cook. And if we don't pre-cook the mushrooms a little bit, you're going to have a shumai that's a little bit too watery. So we'll talk about that when we get to that step. But we will, one of the nice things about dumplings is you definitely can rely on your food processor. So I have this little mini chopper that comes with my hand blender that I'm going to use because our quantity is kind of small. So if you have something like this or a food processor, a blender would work too, but you know how they're a little bit harder to get everything out of, like it's hard to like empty the blender out. But you know, this makes the filling really quick and easy to make. So it's actually not that hard to get dumplings made. It's always the folding and stuffing that takes a little bit longer. So I just want to go over the ingredients really quickly. So we'll be flavoring our interiors with some beautiful aromatic ingredients. So, and I have mine here on the cutting boards. This is my mushroom. So I have some ginger, and I haven't peeled my ginger yet because I want to show you a couple ways to do that. I have, the recipe calls for 1 clove of garlic. I'm actually going to just do 2 because this one's kind of small. Some lemongrass, which we will talk about in a second too if you haven't worked with lemongrass for a while or ever even. I have some white pepper. Oh, let me turn it the right way. White pepper, which is, if you've used it, it's very aromatic. Just a dabble of sesame oil, a little bit of soy sauce, some salt, and that will be our seasoning, what we're going to put it all together with. So let's start with the aromatic stuff, and then we'll talk about the mushrooms and the shrimp in just a second. So I'm actually not even going to really pre-chop these cloves of garlic. I'm just going to put them right into my, you know what, actually, maybe I'll cut them in half because what I don't want to do is get big clumps of garlic in one of the dumplings, which, you know, wouldn't be very good. So maybe I'll even just cut them in 4 pieces. I'm just going to pre-cut these a little bit. I always like to make full use of my power equipment. So when I have something like this, I don't want to have to do too much with it. And maybe I'll put that in front so you can still see it. So now the ginger, maybe you have already seen by now, but maybe not. One of the fastest ways to peel ginger is with this very high-tech tool called the spoon. And all you need to do is hold the spoon in one hand and pull down on the ginger to remove the brown outside skin. And you can actually just kind of manhandle right over one of those little lumps. You know how it has arms on the ginger? So you can get the ginger peeled in no time with a spoon. Just prove that by just finishing this one piece. So I'm peeling the ginger. I'm not going to chop it too much because it's going to go into my little chopper, but I do want to show you the fibery part. Hot tip, whenever you're doing your prep for a recipe, I always have a little waste bowl off to the side so that I can keep my cutting board clear. I don't have to keep walking back and forth to the trash can or the compost. So sometimes you have a little piece of ginger like this, and it's a little bit too hard to even hold with your hand. Like I'm having a hard time getting it done like this. You can also just square it off with a knife. So rather than do that spoon thing, you can just go around and cut off the sides like that. So since we've been doing virtual classes, you know, we are very aware that not everybody has every tool in their kitchen, but almost everybody I've met has a spoon. So that's a tip I feel very confident in sharing with almost everybody. Okay, so we only need about a 1/2 inch piece of ginger. And it's really up to you. You can use as much ginger as you want in this recipe. So one tip when you buy fresh ginger like this, you know, sometimes it's hard to buy just the little piece that you want. I'm going to take this peeled piece of ginger and store it in my freezer. And then when I need ginger, I can just break off a piece and use it. It holds very well like that. Some people say they store it in their refrigerator in some kind of spirit, you know, whatever. I only do that if I'm making cocktails. Otherwise, I freeze it. It's great in a cocktail, though. Okay, so this ginger is going to just go into my chopper like that. However, you know how ginger is very fibrous? And the fibers tend to run up and down the ginger in this direction. So I want to cut that fiber. Otherwise, when I put it in my chopper, I'm just going to have a whole lot of string that is stuck around the chopper. So I'm going to cut this into thin coins like this. So you notice that when I cut, I'm always keeping my fingers turned in a claw. Like one of my coworkers likes to call it Lady Gaga claws. So like put your claws up. And then I can use my knuckles as a little bit of a guide. So I want to cut through the ginger just to make sure that I'm disrupting those fibrous strings that go down it. And that is just going to go in with my ginger. So far, just to recap, what we've done is I have cut my garlic into 4 pieces, and I've peeled and cut my ginger into some coins and stuck it in the little processor. And now, speaking of fiber and fibrous things, I have my lemongrass. And this lemongrass is a little bit ugly on the end because I actually grow this in my yard. It's almost like an invasive weed. I don't know how it would deal with snow, but almost every other part of the country, you can actually grow it. It's very fragrant. The leaves up at the top are really nice. Everything is really good. So this, just like the ginger, it has very aggressive fiber that runs up and down the pole. So before I put some lemongrass into my chopper, I'm going to cut through like this so that my chopper can then chop some of it up. So if you got your lemongrass from the store and it has like really brown, hard leaves on the end, just pull those off until you get to this lighter inner, it's kind of almost a yellow at the bottom and then light green. And we're just going to use these more tender parts here. So one tip for the rest of this piece of lemongrass, I could save this in a Ziploc bag. I have a Ziploc bag in my freezer that I keep for stock bits. So if I have the stems of a shiitake mushroom, for example, those are great for making stock with. I'll save the lemongrass too. It's really fragrant in chicken stock. So I'm going to just get a few more of these little pieces off. I've got this light yellow piece of the lemongrass stalk. Okay, so this is the aromatherapy part of the evening. This smells really great. I'm going to put that in here. And we will give these things a few pulses to get them chopped up into a paste before we put some of the shrimp in. So we want to be sure that we don't over-process the shrimp or the pork too much. So in my case, all I need to do is put this on the top. If you don't have a hand blender, I highly recommend one. So I'm just going to pulse this a few times. So I recommend using the pulsing because what happens is the big pieces hop up and then go back down again. My lemongrass is very woody. It does not seem to be wanting to break up. So I think what I need to do for this is give it a little bit of liquid. So sometimes you run into this where everything in your processor is, and it could be that there's not enough volume in there too, but everything is very woody in there. So I'm trying to decide if I want to give it another chop. So it's really great in a cooking class when something like this happens so that you can think about like what would be the solution for how to solve this. But I think in this case, I'm just going to put the blade back down, make sure it's all the way down. That could have been an issue too. And I'm going to put my measurement of the soy sauce that we're using in the recipe in there. So it's about a teaspoon of soy sauce. So sometimes a little bit of liquid is what's needed to get the paste to start to form. Got it backwards. There we go. Classic. All right, and I have a cute little scraper here. Let me scrape it down. And keep it going. So what I'm looking for are smaller bits. It doesn't have to be a total paste. I want these kind of small pieces like that. But what I still have in here in the bottom are some larger pieces of ginger, and that's what I want to avoid. So let's just keep processing a few more, and then I'll add some shrimp in and see if I can't get that. So I specifically picked to use this smaller chopper tonight because very often, if I put this in a larger food processor, there's just too much surface. These won't catch the blades. And so if you're trying to process this small amount in a larger food processor, you might be having kind of a similar problem. So let's put that to the side for a minute. I have here about a half a pound of raw peeled shrimp, and we're going to chop this shrimp a little bit. And if you're using mushrooms, hang on, we'll get there in just a second with the mushrooms. But when we eat the shumai, we don't want the interior to be all just a paste. We want there to be a little texture to it. So we will chop some of these shrimp to put into the processor. So we'll do about half of them. And then the rest of the ones in the bowl. Oh, look, and I got a tail in there. We don't want to eat that part. The rest of them, we're going to cut into small pieces, but we won't actually chop them in the processor because we don't want to get it all into too much of a mush. Okay. So this is just a little pre-cut before I put it into the processor. And so I'm just leaving, maybe I'll do these. Okay, so these are going in the processor. And then for the ones that I will make sure that I'm not over processing, these are relatively small shrimp, but I think I'm going to cut them like this so that nothing is too much wider than that. It's a little bit hard to do. There we go. I'm cutting them down where the vein was. All right. Now, it is possible to do a combined filling. So you could have some mushroom with some shrimp or some mushroom with some the little liquid that I poured out of the bowl there. So if that is the version that you want to do, that's absolutely fine. So now I'm going to take each piece of shrimp and also cut through them so that I'm making really small, I would say they're about the size of a piece of corn. So if you can relate to that. So I'm cutting the shrimp into these little tiny corn-sized pieces. And to do that, what I did was I cut the shrimps in half, sort of like butterflied them. And then I'm just cutting them again. So they'll be prepared. If you're using mushroom, and the recipe suggested, for example, king oyster mushrooms, those are absolutely gorgeous, big mushrooms that are wonderful for grilling. You can either grill them whole, or you can cut them into slabs. I've put bulgogi, the Korean marinade, onto slabs of oyster mushrooms and grilled them like a vegetable plant-based version of bulgogi, and that's really delicious. And you could also cut them into cylinders, shorter cylinders. They look just like scallops. And then when you grill them, that is also really delicious. Okay, so there is my shrimp that is cut up, but chopped, but not processed. It's a little bigger piece. So again, I cut them into pieces about the size of a piece of corn. So just for reference, and I'm going to put them back into my little bowl. So these will not go into the processor. All right, and now I'm just going to wash off my knife so that I can demo that mushroom for you. So So if you're, as I told Kate, if you're only doing the mushroom, I'm going to have you, and I don't think this is actually in the recipe. Let me just check and make sure. The mushrooms will weep a little bit. So I'm going to want you to saute that mushroom a little bit, maybe about halfway, but I would chop it first. So where did I put my mushroom? So here is a king oyster mushroom. Let me wipe the shrimp off here. Here's a king oyster mushroom. And it really is just an overgrown regular oyster mushroom. Just the same way that a portobello mushroom is a giant cremini mushroom. This is a big oyster mushroom. So remember I said you could cut them like to look like scallops. So if you crosshatch the top of them like this, when you grill them, it's amazing. They have just kind of the same texture as a scallop. You can also cut them into planks like this for barbecuing. But tonight for the shumai, you're going to process them or chop them very finely. So what you could do right now is if you're only doing the mushroom filling, cut your mushrooms in pieces like this, saute them lightly so that they start to release some of their liquid. And then you can put it back into the processing bowl. Okay. And the reason for that is with the shrimp and the pork, we have this natural tendency for the meat fibers to kind of like Velcro to each other and hold together. So we don't actually, the meat filling inside a dumpling is almost never cooked in advance. It's not like when you do an empanada, you cook the filling in advance, but for a steamed dumpling, you want that texture. You want that, it's almost like a meatball, right? But for the mushroom, we're going to need to have a little bit of the moisture released. Okay, so I'm going to put my mushroom aside. I will definitely grill and eat that later tonight. I love these things. I think they're so delicious. Put it over here with my other stuff. All right, I'm going to process this into a paste. All right, so I want to get back to gallery view for myself because I want to see what you all are doing. So let me give this a few pulses and then I'm going to give it a little bit longer. Yeah, so adding the shrimp in there really helped everything else catch on the blades. So I think my problem in not getting everything chopped up very finely was there just really wasn't enough stuff being chopped, even though this is kind of a mini chopper. So this is not quite a paste yet. I'm just stopping to sort of show you this process. Let me go back to the close-up. So this has broken up, but it's not. I'll show you when it's a paste. I mean, it literally will be like not quite toothpaste, but a good paste. Okay, let me know if you have questions as well. So one sign that I know that it's beginning to become a paste is I start to see a ball of it's almost like a dough that rolls around in here. So I think you can kind of see how that's happening. And now when I open it, there are, big gaps, like the paste has gathered itself, which is what dough tends to do as well. And it's very gooey. I do still see one big piece of ginger. And I'd like to say it's not possible to overprocess it, but that may not exactly be true. You probably could overprocess this. So I don't want to go too far on it. And what would happen is when it's overprocessed is the texture would just be very, very firm in the dumpling. And you want it to be, because it will release its liquid, you want it to be moist. Okay, so I have a pretty good paste there. I'm going to add the rest of my seasonings. So remember, I already put in my soy sauce. So if you did not, we'll add the soy sauce. And then I want to make sure I get the half a teaspoon of rice wine vinegar. And I put it away. I'm so tidy that I've already cleaned up. The class isn't over yet. So half a teaspoon of rice wine vinegar. And that helps to balance out some of the saltiness and the natural sweetness. And also a half a teaspoon of sesame oil. Magic, delicious ingredient. I might have put a little bit extra in there. And then we're going to drop down to a quarter teaspoon of white pepper. And I've got that little.
If you don't have white pepper, what substitute would you use, or none? Black pepper wouldn't be right?
Yeah, I think black pepper would be delicious, to be honest. And, you know, white pepper has a very different aroma. It's, you know, as I just opened this, I was reminded it's a little like cardamom. It's got a little edge to it. So I would probably just substitute a few grinds of nice black pepper. I think that'd be great. And salt. So also just a quarter teaspoon of salt. And I will pulse it again, just to mix in the seasonings. Okay. And now I'm going to bring it out of my processor into the bowl where I have my pre-chopped shrimp. So remember, this is the shrimp that I cut into like little pieces that are the size of corn. I think I got a little white pepper in my nose. It's actually quite aggressive, that white pepper. Clean that off. Those processor blades are very sharp. You always want to be sure that you handle them with respect. When I get cut in my kitchen, it's always by something I'm not expecting, like a paper cut, or somebody has put a processor blade inside a bowl to soak, and that's really very dangerous. So now I'm just going to fold this together. So I have some lumpy shrimp and I have some pasty shrimp, and that pasty shrimp has all those delicious aromatics, the lemongrass, the ginger, the garlic, the white pepper, which is going to make me sneeze any moment now. It's like super predictable. Okay. So Kate, how is it going with the mushrooms? I don't want to leave you behind. I should say I'm becoming, again, I used to never use my microwave, but I'm starting to use it a little bit more now. You could also use your microwave to steam those mushrooms a little bit.
You're cooking up well, I think.
Okay, perfect. So you don't need them to be totally sauteed down. They don't have to be completely, you know, cooked down. You just want to release some of the moisture in them. Okay, Rose, you doing okay? Did your food processor manage that even though it was a bigger processor? She thinks so. I can read. I'm like a dentist now. I can like.
I think so. If you look at it.
Yeah, it actually looks good. It looks like a nice paste. Yeah, perfect. And, you know, if you're ever doing this and you just don't want to haul out the food processor for all this too, you can buy, you know, pre-grated ginger and garlic and those things. And if you could use ground pork or ground chicken, you know, some kind of pre-ground meat, or even the new plant-based meats like Impossible or whatever. And you could put some little cut up shrimp in it, right? So you could do a blended one that way too. So. Good. Okay, so I have my filling here. One way you can check the seasoning on this filling, and I've actually checked this recipe, this seasoning is spot on perfect. But if you're kind of going your own adventure and you're trying to add some different things, what I would recommend doing is cooking off a little piece of the filling so that you can taste it and make sure it's where you want it. So you could, again, do that in the microwave if you wanted to, you know, just take a little dab of it on a plate, warm it through so, you know, you're not eating the raw stuff. or in a little saute pan, you can cook a little piece of it off. But if you're using this recipe, the spices are right on. I'll tell you that. Okay, so I have 2 different kinds of wrappers because you never know what the people in a class will find when they go shopping. The recipe says a square wrapper, which I have. I have these wonton dynasty. I think people see these in the grocery store all over the country. And then my local grocery store also had these vegan ones, which really just means there's no egg in them. And somebody in my family has an egg allergy. So I snatched a few of these up too to just try them. So you can use a round or a square. It doesn't matter. So depending on what you got, has anybody gotten anything different than something like this? Yeah. See, look, she's got, we're like twin wonton people. We hold them up and we've got the same ones. Yeah, perfect. Oh, look, yours is, it looks like it came from the Chinese grocery store with the carrot, yeah, that's awesome. Oh yeah. The colors are the same. Great. I have never found a commercially available gluten-free wrapper. So if you ever find one in the store, you'll have to email Britt and let her know where to find it. There are recipes online. You can make your own wrappers if you're looking for something gluten-free, but I think it's very hard to find. Okay, so this is the really fun part. And I love this. When I'm in the store looking for wrappers, one of the things that I do is I try to look at it and I'm trying to find the thinnest wrapper for a shumai. So I want to have more filling and less wrapper for a shumai. So I'm going to take a stack of them out and I will show you the process for how to form the shumai. So I'm going to make about 4 or 5 of them, and then I'm going to start steaming a few, and then we can talk about some more forming them. So what I have here is I just took a baking sheet and I put a little bit of pan spray on it. So this is going to be my resting spot. So when I make a shumai, that way, if I set it down on a piece of parchment paper or on a plate, sometimes the bottom, there's a little moisture and it sticks on the plate and it tears, and that's really frustrating. So I have you don't have to use pan spray. You could put a little, use a little butter, but something a little bit oily on your resting spot will save you from cursing at the one that tears and makes you angry. Okay, so we're just about ready. And then I just want to show you the other thing that I have going over here is I have a pan. So I don't have a bamboo steamer. I have one of these metal ones from the grocery store. These work just equally well. I have put a few pieces of cabbage on there. And again, the pieces of cabbage are to keep this from sticking, my shumai from sticking to the metal as they steam. And I have let me grab a pot holder, it's hot. I have my water steaming already. So I have a shallow pan and this will fit right inside there. You can see there's a little legs on the bottom. So they sit right up above the level of the water. And if you, some people don't have a steamer at all, and that's okay. So what you can do is take a plate like this, and I'm going to use my tongs to set it down there. You can take a plate and set it upside down in the water like that, so that it's raised above the level of the water again. And then, apologies for the dog barking. And then you can put your shumai, transfer this over here. You can put your shumai directly on a plate like this. The key is just you want to make sure you've got enough space around that plate, because so the steam will come up, and then you want to cover. So whatever you're going to cook your shumai in, you want to have just a, this is maybe like 1/2 inch deep water. I'm going to remove this again. And actually, maybe I can, just in case you haven't seen, they sell these in almost every grocery store these days. They're really small and compact, which is one of the reasons I like it over the bamboo steamer. Even though the bamboo steamer is very attractive, I can store that really easily. And I'm going to, plate's not happy being steamed. So I'm just going to set this down in my water. And if you don't happen to have cabbage, you could use lettuce. I've seen people use individual slices of, I can't imagine who's at the door at this point for the dog to bark like that. So that's just set up and ready to go. That's ready to receive my shumai. Okay.
Can I ask you a question about your cabbage?
Yes.
I noticed that the cabbage really isn't covering the whole bottom. So we should have small pieces like you do and just lay them around.
So I find it easier to do that. It's really, it can be kind of like a geometric trick to get an entire, piece of cabbage. And I do want to leave some room for the steam to come up. Like the whole advantage of using, the bamboo steamers aren't solid on the bottom, right? They let the steam through, and it's the same with this. So I will be setting my shumai down on a piece of cabbage. And I feel like I've lost a piece of cabbage here. I feel like I had more coverage there.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I find it easier to get them to be in my, I also have a really hard time wrapping cabbage rolls, like beef stuffed cabbage rolls. I can never get the whole piece of cabbage off the head. So I will buy kale and I wrap it up in kale, and that works really well. Okay. So now that I've made my true confessions to all of you, this is how we will make a shumai. So, a shumai is it's basically like a scallop shape, right? It's got the wrong camera on. It's got it's a tall or sort of a short fat cylinder. So I'm going to use my hand to shape that. So I'll put one wrapper over my hand, making an O. And I'll just press it down in there a little bit just to kind of get started. And then actually, let me put this over here. I'm going to take between a teaspoon and a tablespoon or so of filling to put in my O, like so, and tuck it in a little bit. Now, I like shumai that are just 1 or 2 bites. You see that I have extra wrapper up here. I don't want it really to fill. I don't want it to be much more than a mouthful. So now I'm going to take it out, and I'll show you what to do with that in just a second. I'm going to take it out and tap it down on my surface so I get a nice flat bottom, and make sure that my edges are tucking in. And I have just a little bit of water here. And you know how these wrappers have their cornstarch to keep them from sticking together? I'm going to take advantage of that cornstarch. I'm just going to wet it and fold those edges back. Let me refold that one.
Chef, we have one question. Should we have pulsed the pork with the aromatics?
So the pork won't need to be ground up like the shrimp did, but you can definitely, just to make it easier to mix. Yeah, you could pulse it, or you can just mix it with a spatula. Either way. Great question. Okay, so there is my first shumai. See, she's got a flat bottom now because I tapped her down a little bit. I'm going to put her on the resting spot, and let me show you that again. And then I'll show you with the round one, just in case there's somebody that got the round wrappers. So I'm putting it over my hand in the shape of an O, and I'm doing my non-dominant hand as a shaper. And I'm going to press it down a little bit. And it does help if you try to kind of make these pleats a little bit before you put the shrimp in. There you go. And let's get a good dollop. There we go. So the recipe mentions using a butter knife to even off the top, and I'm just a little bit of a fingers person. I feel like I have all these great utensils here at the end of my arms, And so I will probably tend to use that. So I flattened it off. I'm going to tap so right now the bottom's a little bit wonky. Just going to tap it down on my work surface. And then you can either use the stickiness from the meat, or you can add a little bit of water to your finger and turn back the folds so that you're not covering the top of the meat or the vegetable, whatever you've got in there. And then I just give it a little tapping. So now I have a little round shumai. So how are yours turning out? It takes a little getting used to. I see the smile on somebody's face. They're like, yeah, how are mine turning out? Hang on, let me show you. Okay, so now if you want to get fancy, this is off-road. This isn't written into our recipe, but I just want to show you a little thing, because very often, well, so in a Chinese restaurant, you know, red is a lucky color. So you might get shumai that have a little bit of fish roe, red fish roe on top, or some little decoration. And when you go to a Japanese restaurant and get them, they almost always have a pea or something green in the middle. I don't know why the green, but so I took a piece of green onion, and I just kind of cut it up a little bit and made some little like green onion confetti. And then I also, because I'm always a little bit extra, I have this teeny tiny little heart cutter. So sometimes you see these, I think they used to be called aspic cutters, you know, they're kind of, but this came in a cookie cutter set that I had, I think, to make Linzer hearts. And I cut a little piece of carrot. So I did this. I made a thin slice of carrot. And I have this cookie cutter, but you don't need to have any kind of cookie cutter. Oops, it didn't go, that one didn't go all the way through. That one doesn't want to cut. This carrot's like, I don't want to be a Valentine. Okay, so you can cut it, or you can just with your knife trim a little piece like that. And maybe you could cut it into 2 little pieces. And then you could put something like that on the top of your shumai before you steam it. And you have a cute little decoration on top. So I'll show you one with the, so you can do something like that. Oops, they're going to slide. You can do something like that if you want, like totally extra. That's just the part that, you know, whatever. Just for fun, because, you know, February is such a short month and it has all the things in it, right? It's got like, it's Lunar New Year this year. We've got Valentine's Day. It's Black History Month. Like we've got to do all of the things. So maybe we'll do Lunar New Year and Valentine's and do shumai all together. You never know. Okay, let me do a round one. Does anybody have round wrappers, or should I just ignore that? It's good to know. See, I'm not a huge fan. Oh, that's thinner than I thought. There you go. I really like these to be thin. So I'm just going to put it down there in my okay. There we go. So one of the interesting things about shumai is I think that people use all sorts of dipping sauces. So we have suggested to you that Mayploy sweet chili sauce, which is absolutely delicious. You can also use a soy sauce, or you can use soy sauce with a little bit of vinegar in it. All right, I am going to stick with my square ones. There we go. So just making a few pleats, making sure they're all tucked in. And then I like to fold these guys back. I really want the level of the filling to be level with the top of the wrapper, because they steam better that way. And because we are using a raw filling, we're going to want to make sure that it's done all the way through. So these are going to take about 8 to 10 minutes to steam. And you typically need to do them in batches. I mean, even my steamer's pretty big, but I'm not sure exactly how many it's going to hold. So I think I'm going to put these 4 that I've done on right now. And we'll just keep folding them together and talking about it. And then hopefully by the time we've got them all stuffed, these will be ready to taste. Okay. So if you want to put a few on early too, that would be great. I've got putting them on back here. I'm going to turn on my burner just a little bit. I forgot to put the lid back on my water. So you can see I'm just setting them on the cabbage. And I'm going to cover that up and we will keep stuffing. Is everybody having success?
I'm not so sure about this pleating thing.
Yeah. They don't have to be 100% even, right? So,
I mean, this is what I'm getting. It's definitely not.
let's see. It's not quite in the camera. I can't quite see it. Oh yeah, that's actually beautiful. I love that. So don't forget when these cook that the shape is going to change.
Okay.
I like the color of your wrapper. That yellow color looks good.
I got these at the Chinese market. They're Hong Kong style.
Yeah,
If that
that
means
should be
anything.
great. I think it means it has extra egg in it. I'm not sure. But you know, this is a rough time of year to go to the Chinese market because of Lunar New Year. Everybody's there buying stuff. So yeah, very busy. My local market was just incredibly backed up. Okay, so I'm just folding these guys down. Is anybody trying a little decoration on top? So I always, I'm admitting everything to you tonight. I have a bag of peas in my freezer that's multi-use. So when we have a little injury that needs to have something cold on it, we use that bag of peas, but I also will steal a few peas out for things. And I would steal maybe a few peas out of the bag to put into a shumai from time to time, or like sometimes I'll like throw them on top of a stew that just seems like it needs pop of color, whatever. So if you've got nothing green in the house, maybe you've got a bag of frozen peas you could steal a pea from. Okay. So every time you make dumplings, it's a little bit like making pancakes. You know how the first pancake never comes out exactly the way you're hoping. And then the more you practice, the easier it gets and the better they become. So maybe that's one reason why people make lots and lots of dumplings, because the more you make, the better each one tends to look. So that's what it looks like when, oops, sorry. This is what it looks like when, before I've really turned it down. I've got the level of the shrimp is down there. And then just a little tap of water on each of those protruding guys. And we're golden. Has anybody made any other kind of dumplings for New Year's this year?
No, but I've got so many wrappers. I see crab rangoon in my future.
My favorite.
Me too. Without the green onions, though. I just want the cream cheese and crab.
That's fine. You're here to enjoy. I also like a little bit of water chestnut in mine. I like it to be just a little crispy. All right. So if you have leftover wontons, they also do freeze pretty well. So you could freeze them for another day. You can also see why this is very often a family affair, kind of like making tamales. Once you have the filling made, it's just a lot of handwork to get them all done. But it's fun handwork. It's nice when you've got somebody here in the kitchen with you and you can be talking and laughing. And it's my mother-in-law's side of the family. People would gather and make gyoza for the January 1st New Year's. And it was a lot of fun.
As a plug for Feast with extra dumpling wrappers, we have some really awesome dumpling classes that you can take in a private setting with Chef Peggy or any of our other chefs. We have Chinese soup dumpling class and a gyoza class with I think scallion pancakes, and another gyoza class with pork tonkatsu. So check those out if more dumplings are in your future.
Absolutely. It's really fun to do a one-on-one class for the chefs as well, because we really get to communicate with people. And sometimes the classes are like families who live far apart, or I've met some people where they used to live together in an apartment building in New York, and one couple moved to Chicago. And this is, one of the ways they get together. So especially when we're not traveling too much, this is a great way to try to meet people, and hey, you don't have to fly. Flying isn't as fun as it used to be. Let's face that. All right. I'm looking for my wontons. Pork katsu, Britt, that sounds really good.
I'm so jealous of all of the shumai happening right now. They will all look so awesome.
They actually smell really good. It's still, even though they're raw, the sesame really comes through. So I'm really excited to eat a few of these for dinner. I personally, this is kind of a small batch. I think I would definitely have no trouble eating this batch at all. But if you needed to store these, I would freeze them cooked. And that way you just need to rewarm them when you want to eat them. You don't have to worry about freezing raw product, because sometimes when it's frozen all the way through, it's hard for it to cook all the way through and you end up with a little raw middle. You don't want that. So you want to steam them and then cool them down and freeze them if you wanted to store some for later.
Chef Peggy, the shumai that you have on the steamer, the first batch, it's 8 minutes now.
Oh, perfect. Let's check them. I've got one last, I've got just about enough to just finish one more. So let me fold that real quick. Maybe I'll let it wait because I don't want to over steam, but I'll check. 8 to 10 minutes is typically what we're looking for. And don't forget, when you open a pot that's steaming, open it like this away from you so that the steam doesn't come up onto you. Oh, so cute. Look at that. There's my little hearts. So one way to check, on the doneness is to cut one in half and see. But the other way is just to assess the texture of it. And these are really bouncy, so I can tell they're done. So I'm also looking at the wonton wrapper to make sure it's opaque all the way around. And where it has doubled over, it's a little bit not quite there yet. So I think my filling is done, but my wrapper would benefit from another minute or so. So let's just give it another minute and we'll come right back to that. And I have just this one last friend here that just needs to be folded over, and I will have finished my batch. So I got about 10 out of my batch. How many are you guys getting, does it seem like? Okay. And I'm just going to poke those guys in like that, just to give them a little color. And I have all that cornstarch from the wrappers on my fingertips. Let me just rinse that off real quick. And check these wrappers one more time. Oh yeah, that looks great. So I have a plate waiting over here. So just problem diagnosing. See, this one was my round wrapper, and it didn't benefit from the cornstarch adherence that my square wrapper had. The square wrappers really are coming out to be the winners. And I do not have to replace this cabbage. So if I want to steam the rest of my dumplings, I can just go ahead and put them on the same cabbage, because really they're just acting as non-stick agents for me. So I guess if you, steamed 3 or 4 rounds and maybe the cabbage was a little bit too, was falling apart, then you could do that. But here I have some beautiful shumai and some mayploy, the sweet chili sauce. So I think the chili, so they're actually made of pickled chilies, so it's not really super spicy. And the sweetness go really well with the natural sweetness of the shrimp and also the pork. So we can try that. Does anybody have any out of the steamer? I know we've been going a little quickly. I love it when I see people on Zoom, they're laughing, and I don't know if they're laughing because I said, does anybody have any out of the steamer? And they're like, ha, 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 really? Or something more fun happened. I'm going to pour out a little bit of that mayploy.
Natasha has a whole plate of shumai ready to rock, right? That's amazing.
Beautiful. That's gorgeous. Here's what mine are looking like. I like my little decorations. Actually, these hearts are kind of falling off, so maybe I would have put them in like that and they would stick a little better. Kind of silly, but that's okay. I see Natasha also does not have a bamboo steamer, so never let that kind of thing stop you. There's always ways to get around things like, not having a steamer. And that's one of the advantages of having a chef walk you through a recipe, is that we can, help you through those things. Not everybody has, all the equipment. And actually, maybe you don't even need all the equipment. Do not tell Williams-Sonoma I said that. But it's true.
We have one question. How did you know that the wrapper was not ready?
So when I looked at the wrapper, it was not fully opaque. It had a look to it that was kind of like a frosted window. Let me see if I can zoom in on this. And when it's fully opaque like this, it's ready. So it feels like pasta. It has a look of pasta. I'm going to pull one out I just put in the steamer that's not ready, to see if you can see the difference here. So that's a little, I'm not sure that on the camera it's going to be as evident, but this is, I can see that it's still tacky. So this is the one I just pulled out of the steamer that just went in. And on this one, it has the look of cooked pasta. Did that help answer the question? It's a little bit by touch, yeah, and a little bit by look. And I think I'm gonna take a bite and just see. So good. I love the aromatics inside that. The lemongrass, to me, really makes it. I don't really even need the dipping sauce. I think the dipping sauce is totally extra. There's so much flavor in this one shumai. It's always my favorite when I go for dim sum. And sometimes they just don't seem to have a lot of flavor to them. So I really like this one.
Chef, we have one more question. Does altitude affect the cooking time?
It shouldn't affect the cooking time other than the amount of time it takes the water to steam. Right. So, but once your water is steaming, so it's kind of a technical food science question when you get to the heart of it, but water boils at a certain temperature and then it converts to steam at a certain temperature. But once it's at that temperature, it's there. So once your water is steaming, now steam at a higher temperature, water boils. So how high are you? What altitude? I guess it depends. Like maybe for 14,000 feet, it's a little.
We're just 5,000 feet. So
5,000. Yeah, it shouldn't be all that different for boiling water, right? So your water is boiling almost at 212. So you should be fine. Once it's steaming, you should be fine for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for cooking with me tonight. I'm going to stay and watch and see if anybody wants to take a bite or if there's any other questions. And how are the mushrooms sticking together for you pretty well, Kate? Good.
I'd love to take a group photo of anybody that has completed shumai, if you want to give us a good view of them.
I saw Michael's camera. I think you guys just took a bite. Oh, look at that.
Oh, nice. Wow, I'm so
Beautiful.
impressed.
That's awesome.
Looks great.
You can hold one up. That's my eye. There you go.
Love it.
That's great. It's like a Valentine's vignette there with you guys are like dipping out of each other's plates. Nice. And how's the seasoning for you? Everything turn out fine? Perfect. That's great.
Hey, we had if you were wondering why we were laughing earlier, it's because we were trying to do the plate steamer way. And it was rattling around in there. We had to scramble to try to remove it and find something else.
I was going to explode for a second.
Yeah, no, it will rattle because the water under the plate is like trapped. It makes air bubbles, right? It is a little bit a noisier steamer, but it works pretty well.
Yeah, it worked out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's great. I think I saw those metal steamers at my local grocery store in the last week or so for like, I don't know, $4 or $5. And we use them to steam dumplings all the time, whether they're purchased dumplings or, ones that we make, but also it's really great to like, heat something up with. It's just such a convenient item to have. And they store so small. Fantastic. Rose, have yours turned out pretty well? Oh yeah, look at that. I just love the color.
Just to make sure, because I thought it looked good, but the pork was not done.
Yeah.
So now I'm just being super cautious.
Yeah. So, the chef's tip for that would obviously be to use an instant read thermometer, which is a great way to make sure everything's cooked. So you want to make sure you get the pork to at least 160. And these are the ones that like every health inspector in the entire country uses. It's called a thermopen, and it's very rapid and very accurate. So it has a really fine point on it. And you can test that way as well. It's really quick.
What temperature would it be at?
So for pork, you definitely want over 160, 165. Yeah.
And I'll use that because I have the same one.
Yeah. Any ground meat, you want to get to 165.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hot mushrooms, huh? I'm watching Kate. I'm like, I can just feel like the mushroom liquid being hot in your mouth. That's very hot. Super cool.
They're not pretty, but they taste good.
Well,
That's all that matters.
that's all that matters. Exactly.
Yeah. This is very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Great. Well, we hope to see you in another class sometime. And Happy New Year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Happy New
Yeah,
Year.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, Maggie. Okay. All right. Good night, Kate.